Was there a security lapse? Absolutely.
The president has come close to losing his life once again.
There is still an Iranian threat.
The would-be assassin has been identified.
A second time in 2 months, and we've got 2 months to go. It's that kind of sense of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
This marks a troubling chapter for America and the world. It's been less than 10 weeks since President Trump was shot and nearly killed during a rally in Pennsylvania. On that fateful day, a miraculous tilt of his head spared him from a fatal shot, the bullet grazing his ear in a heart-stopping close call. The world watched in real time as that chilling moment unfolded. His wife, children and grandchildren, along with millions of American citizens and people around the world, holding their breath in shock. And just 64 days later, the president has come close to losing his life once again.
Well, this is a Fox News alert. Former President Trump is safe after gunshots were reported while he was golfing at his club in West Palm Beach at the Trump International Golf Course, not Mar-a-Lago. The former president is fine, his campaign says. Those shots were fired in the vicinity of the golf course. We're now waiting for an update from the Secret Service and police about all this.
In another terrifying incident, a would-be assassin managed to get within hundreds of meters of President Trump and seconds away from taking a shot at the former president. The chilling proximity of this threat has sent shockwaves through the nation. In the immediate aftermath of this latest assassination attempt, Eric Trump spoke candidly to Fox News, underscoring the gravity of the situation. My father is running out of lives here. How many more rifles are going to come within assassination distance of my father?
First of all, was there a security lapse? Absolutely. You've got a threat with a firearm getting within a proximity to President Trump that a moderately skilled marksman would be able to take that shot 400 yards. I mean, we're in New Hampshire right now. We have 400, 500, 600 yard ranges all over the place. That's not a difficult shot to make. Given the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, we had a gunman who was able to get within 150 yards of the president on a rooftop and be able to take multiple shots at the president, killing a bystander and grazing President Trump. This is the second massive failure of the Secret Service. There needs to be a full audit. There needs to be an overhaul. There needs to be an examination of not only the training protocols, but there also needs to be an examination, a thorough examination of just how many of these people are there, not because of their skill set and their mindset, but because they're DEI hires, courtesy of directors like Kimberly Cheatham.
It really is such a remarkable day, and I feel very sad for my country that there's this level of hatred out there, whether directly or stoked or, every which way in between. And I do fear for the former president that now this has not happened for 40 years in the history of the country. The last one was Ronald Reagan's attempted assassination. And now in a matter of 62 days, you have not one, but two attempts. So it is highly, highly concerning. In terms of the reaction, Kamala Harris put out a statement that I think, was appropriate. She condemned all forms of violence as it has no place in America, and expressed relief that President Trump is safe. I will say that it felt a little bit boilerplate to me. I think she actually missed an opportunity to do something more vice presidential, such as a live televised address from the West Wing or something like that might have helped take down that temperature. But at least, the statement was out there. President Biden put a statement out, I think, hours late. It was 3 hours late and after the vice president, which I don't think was a good look. And I also really quickly looked at other people like former President Obama, Michelle Obama, Vice President Mike Pence, Dick Cheney, all these people who are obviously not big fans of Trump. There was the silence, I think, was quite conspicuous. I didn't see a lot of statements coming out from them.
It depends whether you're a glass half full, glass half empty kind of person. Glass half empty is how on earth did this person get there? How did they get to set up their little hidey hole? If you're a glass half full, the tactical preparations by the Secret Service on the ground on the day worked. The advance party identified the individual, took a shot, they ran away. There was no shot taken at the president. But the questioning will all be about how did it get to that point? How did he get that close? How did he get on the golf course in the first place? And that will lead to questions about whether the degree of protection afforded to the former president is sufficient.
Remember in Butler, PA, that bullet, that would-be assassin's bullet, missed him by this much simply because Donald Trump chose to turn his head at exactly the right moment. You know, that could have had a much different outcome. And then again, in Florida here at the golf course, well, again, an agent saw this guy in the bushes engaged before anything tragic happened. But I've got so many questions about this. Yes, absolutely, you're right. There would be just real, I think, civil implications, I think is the best way to put it, if one of these attempts succeeded, particularly in the case, Peter, where, you know, there are so many questions about how do these people wind up getting so close to the former president. You know, so often we had crooks in Butler, PA. We've got this guy Routh in Florida. I would have thought there would be much more security around the golf course, especially after what happened 9 weeks ago. So, you know, the authorities have it on them to not only protect the president, but be really, really public about the fact that they are doing everything they can. Because otherwise, if, God forbid, a third person tries this and really, God forbid, you know, they're more successful in their attempt, the implications, if people feel like, you know, the president was not protected, I don't want to think about.
Well, remember, there is still an Iranian threat that the Secret Service is aware of that is trying to take the life of President Trump. So this is a very, very fortunate day yet again for the Secret Service, because you had Secret Service agents that were on their game. They prevented it.
Yeah.
And now they have an investigative pathway forward. But at the end of the day, that's not what the Secret Service wants to happen.
The would-be assassin has been identified as Ryan Wesley Routh. As details emerge about Routh, the chilling extent of his plans becomes clearer, shedding light on the grave threat he posed.
Well, let me be clear. The investigation's brand new. I've learned early through my investigations. You let the facts come out. Right now, you know, we are very fortunate because we have a live suspect that we can do interviews, investigations on, and there's a lot more information that needs to come out. But with that said, you can see on the face of it that it was an intentional, focused attack on the president. When you're hanging up ballistic material and you're waiting silently for the president to come to the hole that you're going to be able to target, Houston, you have a big problem. This person is very intent on taking the life of the president. Fortunately, a good citizen saw the suspect running, got engaged, got involved, notified the police, and so now we have a suspect that we're talking to. And let me be clear, there's a whole lot of investigating ahead.
Here in the United States, we have intermediate and long-range shooting clubs at virtually every gun range. We're 300, 400, 500 yards. That's a routine shot for many people. That's deer hunting for a lot of people. So that's not a difficult shot to take at all. And to have a person, and we're talking about a person with a firearm, but let's just talk about a person who is not cleared or authorized to be within that perimeter. That alone, if they caught him there hiding in the bushes and he had no weapons or GoPros or backpacks or any even malevolent intent, to have a person just out of curiosity factor trying to see how close that they could get to President Trump, that alone would be a major security breach. And now we have not one, but two involving powerful firearms within weeks of each other. That's not acceptable.
We just did an interview here in Washington this evening with a former member of the Secret Service, and we asked him what he expected in the future, and he said, I absolutely expect more of this. And we asked him why, and he said, because crazy people will see what other crazy people almost accomplish and want to do it themselves. So an assassination attempt almost begets another assassination attempt, which begets another one. And I think we'd be foolish to think it could be just limited to Donald Trump. Add to that, you take the high domestic rhetoric politically, along with folks who are mentally ill, and add to it a very, very explosive international scene. Keep in mind, there's a lot of foreign governments that would like to see the President of the United States and the former President of the United States out of the way. One of the comments that the accused assailant made today was that he thought that the Iranians had an open field to assassinate Donald Trump. So it's a very, very explosive sort of situation, both domestically and internationally. I think we're all just glad that the Secret Service did their job and there was no actual assassination attempt here, and certainly nothing successful.
The latest assassination attempt highlights a bureaucratic failure, but an individual success. On one hand, the fact the shooter was identified and intercepted by an alert agent is an achievement. The swift actions of the Secret Service in securing President Trump's safety represents a significant success. But the troubling reality remains that a shooter was able to get so dangerously close to a former president. The near catastrophe raises serious questions and concerns about the effectiveness and readiness of the security teams tasked with protecting him.
I'm sad that we're having to talk about this again. With that said, it's a very different situation this time because we had two on their game Secret Service agents that immediately identified the threat and took action and ensured that the president was safe. And let me be clear, too, that's not a win for us. It's kind of a partial win because the Secret Service is all about being proactive and making sure things like this don't happen. And I thought the sheriff was very forthright because he mentioned the fact that, well, if this had been a sitting president, we would have had full coverage around the golf course, and thus this wouldn't have happened. That's very truthful. And that tells you that the Secret Service, despite what happened in Butler, and despite the current threats against this president, is still not affording the same resources that they would a sitting president. And I think those are the questions that need to be answered.
The fact it's a second time in 2 months and we've got 2 months to go, it's that kind of sense of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. The question is, what is the Secret Service doing? And it is hard to secure a golf course, but it's certainly not impossible. And to have the perimeter like that, not monitored to the extent that someone can go set up what we saw in that photo from the released by the local law enforcement. And this is one of the key issues in how the safety of the former president and the current Republican nominee is managed. And we're learning more after what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, is so much of what the Secret Service does relies on the local law enforcement. And obviously they've got to step up in a place like Palm Beach because it's a wealthy area. They're used to having the former president living in the county, and they still didn't have that perimeter secured. It is shocking. There's going to be questions on Capitol Hill. It's back in session for the next few weeks from Republicans there. But it is a real question. How do they keep him safe over the next few months in a country with hundreds of millions of guns? A lot of people have it out for Donald Trump. But this is serious, that they had this first issue in Pennsylvania and they haven't done enough, but this has almost happened again.
Clearly, there is a security issue here with somebody that's trying to attempt to get close to Trump with those weapons. That's of high concern in any circumstance. And I think that what we saw is a very appropriate law enforcement response from the Secret Service and the protective detail. Now, the rest, we're going to have to wait for those details. Just like in the last attempt, we are going to see a full review and understand where this threat came from, what the motivations might be, and if there was a breach of security, where we can focus on that.
Well, I've been very transparent, and some of my fellow agents aren't happy with me, but everything starts from the leadership down. Every piece of accountability. You know, I learned as a Marine Corps officer, we were protecting nuclear weapons at the time. There is no fail in that mission. And if there was, it's me. I'm the one that's responsible as the commander. And I think it's time for new leadership. I think they need to reinvent the new world that we live in. It's not the Secret Service of 20 years ago, where a former president gets less resources and we look at it differently. All that needs to go. We've got to ensure that we have free and fair elections in the U.S., that people aren't afraid to go to these events. And that starts with the Secret Service leadership and, quite frankly, the FBI leadership saying, hey, something's broken here. We have to fix it. And until that happens, I'm not sure where we're going to be.
This latest assassination attempt comes against the backdrop of ongoing questions surrounding the Butler shooting. How did Thomas Matthew Crooks manage to gain access to a rooftop and fire at a former president? The unresolved issues from that attack only amplify the urgency of addressing the security lapses that have now put President Trump in peril once again.
The Secret Service should be treating every single rally, every single gathering, every single event as this is the event. This is when everything is going to happen. This is the moment that we've trained for. It's called game intelligence. You game it out, you have scenarios that are played out, you have responses to those scenarios, and you are prepared for every single contingency. And that's a tough job because you have to be prepared for every single contingency. And you have to get every possible contingency right. The bad guy only has to get it right once.
Well, I think any time that you see security details responding to a threat that close, you have to feel like that there was some sort of breach and that other steps need to be taken. You know, these can be very difficult as the protectees move around and then relying and communicating with their partners. We saw that was one of the main issues in Pennsylvania, clearly communicating who's responsible for what those details, those partners doing in those details are going to take responsibility, and how they do it is going to continue to be important.
Following the shooting in Pennsylvania, startling revelations emerged about the extent of threats against Donald Trump. It was disclosed that in the weeks leading up to the attack, the Secret Service had significantly increased security measures in response to intelligence indicating a plot by Iran to assassinate the former president.
Just 3 days after the assassination attempt, US authorities have revealed it had intelligence about an Iranian plot to kill Donald Trump. At this stage, though, there's no known connection to the shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks. But the Iranian threat was deemed serious enough for Secret Service to bolster security in the weeks prior.
Donald Trump has been very tough on Iran, and the Iranian government feels it, knows it, and would love for him to not be the next leader.
As Donald Trump recovers from this latest attack on his life, it's crucial to broaden the discussion about the role of language in the media and politics. Following the shooting, President Biden called for a de-escalation of rhetoric and a more measured tone in political discourse. For a moment, it seemed like we might witness a meaningful shift, but that change never occurred. The mainstream media has persisted in intensifying their attacks on Trump, branding him as a dire threat to democracy. The harsh rhetoric has escalated to such an extent that it's seemingly contributing to the very violence it condemns. Violence that now threatens Trump's life.
This is the direct result of years of the progressive left Democrats calling President Trump Hitler, saying that he's evil, that he's a racist, that that he needs to be eradicated, that he's a scourge. And this becomes fuel. This becomes motivation for people who are mentally defective. They take this as their battle cry, and they say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to solve the world's problems. Here is this blight, this cancer on society. I'm going to take something, a firearm, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to solve this problem. And that within hours of the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler Township, Pennsylvania, you've got Democrats that are doubling down on the rhetoric. This rhetoric is directly responsible for this type of chaos. Directly responsible.
It's wrong to say Democratic politicians are responsible for extremists if they're just engaging in robust criticism. But the Democrats routinely lie about Trump, and I have no particular brief for Trump at all, a lot of criticisms of him, but they lie about Trump in a very extreme fashion. For example, Kamala Harris said that Trump had said if he loses the election, there will be a bloodbath. And most people would think that meant Trump said there'll be killings and bloodlettings and so on. What Trump said was there'd be a bloodbath in the auto industry. So she is intentionally, dishonestly saying Trump threatened killings when he didn't. She also said he praised neo-Nazis in Charlottesville as very fine people. He didn't. He condemned the neo-Nazis, but said on both sides of the demonstration about historic statues in the South, there were very fine people. Now, you tend to let this go. You don't have any great personal sympathy for Trump, and you tend to let it go. But they lie about Trump in such an extreme fashion, they're such barefaced lies, that there are two conclusions out of it. One, they are no better and probably worse than Trump himself in producing polarisation and fever pitch in American society. And two, this has got to contribute to an atmosphere, a fervid, intense atmosphere in which some deranged people come to the conclusion that America would just be better off without Trump. So I think the anti-Trump rhetoric of the Democrats, you can't say that there's a direct, obvious causal link, but it's extremely irresponsible and very, very reprehensible in my view.
The Democrats have been calling him an existential threat, a dictator in waiting, an un-American sort of national problem. They've even used the words Adolf Hitler to describe him. Hillary Clinton has done that previously. So if someone had said that about you for the last several years, and then someone took a shot at you, wouldn't it be human nature to draw a line from the rhetoric to the action? Look, I hope it stops. I really do. I didn't like the former president's tweet today about how things are just going to get worse. He has the ability to make things better. I actually think it would also not only help the country, but help him politically. He's not chosen to do that. That's not his nature. I don't expect him to do that. And sadly, I think, agreeing with one of your man on the street interviews, this is going to become somewhat normal, and it's just going to get worse before it gets better.
There's now under 50 days of the presidential campaign remaining, and after this latest security scare, it will have another dramatic shift in how Donald Trump campaigns in his final leg of the race to the White House.
He has a security detail that is responsible for utilizing force multipliers. Those would be local police departments, sheriff's departments on a county level, state police, Bureau of Criminal Investigations for the respective states that he happens to be visiting, and also additional resources within the federal government. After the first failed attempt in August, his threat level necessarily skyrockets. Clearly, this is an individual who is going to be targeted for violence. It's necessary to reassess the types of protective services that we're providing him and be able to enhance and bolster those. It doesn't seem like that's being done. And certainly, I think that's a logical argument, given the fact that here we are several weeks later and attempt number 2.
Yeah.
And again, thank God. And again, listen, it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle that somebody happens to be on. We don't want to see political opponents shedding blood from the other party.
No.
But when the rhetoric, and I have to go back to the rhetoric that is being perpetrated on a daily basis by multiple players within the Democrat Party of this country, when they continue to propagate the rhetoric that they do, this becomes more likely, and now at this point, an inevitability.
Yeah, but look, I just don't think you can keep him down. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump wants to campaign. The way he wins is by getting in front of people. This was the way he won in 2016. Remember, he spent that whole months and months and months campaign at rallies, at events, in small towns, doing 4, 5, 6 things a day sometimes, while Hillary Clinton, spent most of her time in the Hamptons and in New York and in Hollywood and Beverly Hills doing fundraisers for the elite. And, that's what worked. It flies under the radar, and that's what worked for Trump. And that's what he's going to want to do again.
What about turnout, James? What about turnout?
Yeah, I think people will still come out. And I think here's the other thing, too. I think, we forgot about Butler in 2 weeks. The media cycle ended so quickly on that. And I think the media cycle will end very quickly on this. But it will, Peter, galvanize, I think, his supporters, because this plays exactly into his frame. They are trying to come for me. A lot of the commentary I've seen on Twitter has been, they'd kill any Trump supporter. When they say they mean the people who are out there, that section who absolutely hates Donald Trump and seems to be violently inclined towards him.
Donald Trump was a titan in construction and TV when he decided to take on the ultimate challenge, the presidency of the United States. He saw a nation he loved drifting away from its former glory and decided it was time to step into the Oval Office in an attempt to return America to the country it once was. After a grueling 4 years as president, he lost in 2020 and is now working to reclaim the presidency in 2024. Yet, as he fights to return, his life has come under threat twice in as many months. No matter your political stance, no one in office or seeking office should have their lives at risk. This marks a troubling chapter for America and the world.